Hi, Right Writers. Thank you so much for joining us. In today's video, we're going to be looking at third person point of view. And if third person point of view is a struggle for you, stay tuned because that's what we're going to be looking at today. Thank you so much, Right Writers with Cruise, for joining me. On the left side of the screen, you're going to see our poem that we're going to be working with. And on the right side of the screen, we're going to be working in a Google Doc to ensure our success. And the first thing that we're going to begin with is a working definition of third person point of view. So third person point of view is, we can view it in a few ways. And I'm going to go ahead and expand this Google Doc first before we go back to our poem. So when we're thinking of third person point of view, we want to be thinking about pronouns. Words like he, she, and I can make this lowercase. He, she, it, they, them, themselves. From the narrator perspective, what that means is that the narrator is not part of the story. And so I may decide to put that uppercase here and all caps. The narrator is not part of the story. You can also be thinking about it from sort of a distance perspective. So it's sort of like they give the most distance between what's happening in the story. And so they sort of like, it's not to say that you're throwing shade, but you're keeping a big distance. And you can also think about it is the narrator speaks about others and not about themselves. So those are some working definitions of third person point of view. This idea of using the pronouns he, she, it, they, them, themselves. Keep in mind, there may be other examples of third person. This is just a glimpse here. And then when you're thinking about it, well, what about the narrator, or how does the narrator involve themselves with it? Well, the narrator is not part of the story. The narrator is the most distant from sort of, what's happening. The narrator speaks about others and not about themselves. So we have our work to the left, and the poem is titled, it is by Graham Faust, and it is titled, And the Ghosts. And the ghosts, they own everything. And the ghosts, they own everything. And the ghosts, they own everything. So I wanted to read that poem in a few different ways, and this is one of those poems where, depending on how you change your inflection or how you change which words you emphasize, the poem begins to shift and change and take on a whole new meaning based on perhaps how you read it. However, there is definitely plenty of text evidence to demonstrate third person point of view. We have our title of the poem, And the Ghosts, and then we have, so here's our title, and we have one line. We have a total of 6 words if you include the title referencing. But here is the text evidence right here. They. This is letting us know that this is third person point of view. They own everything. And so this is our key here. They. What, who, or what is they referring to? Well, they is referring back to ghosts. And so, and the ghosts, they own everything. So the pronoun they refers back to ghosts. That's pretty much it. That's how we're going to look at this for our text evidence for our writing today. So when thinking about and the ghosts, they own everything, we're going to use that for our text evidence, and we know that they is referring back to the ghosts. To set ourselves up for success, Right Writers, we want to make sure that let's grab our link to our poem. So we're going to hit that Control C, Control V, And again, that gives us access to the poem once we get away from it and we're just working, let's say, with a Google Doc. And so that's a way to ensure that we have access to it. We want to make sure we have the title of the poem. We want to make sure that it is written as we type it. It's exactly as the poet, the writer had intended. We are including our poet, Graham Faust, and we're going to pull our text evidence. So we have our text evidence demonstrating that we are pulling lines from the poem, and we want to make sure that we have quotation marks around our lines from the poem to ensure that we are not copying. We want to make sure that we include those quotation marks because that lets our reader know, hey, these are not my words. So text evidence, lines from the poem. And you can bet that we are going to also use the title of the poem within our text evidence. So I'm going to go ahead and maximize this screen now. Our text evidence is the line from the poem, "They own everything." Are we going to use the title? Yes, we are. So I'm going to hit that Control C, and then I'm going to hit that Control V as well. And then that way I'm reminded that I'm going to end up using the title as part of my text evidence because that's how Graham Faust wanted us to read the poem. If we go back, we need the title in order to know who or what they is referring to. So thinking about our middle school paragraph, we want to make sure, right, writers, that we are including all the information that we need and we're letting the reader know, hey, we're going to be talking about third person point of view. So we want to make sure that we give the reader a definition of what we're talking about and even the pronouns. So let's take a look at how we're going to set this one up. We want to make sure that we're using active voice. And so in order to do that, we do not want to use is or was. So we want to make sure we use as many action verbs as possible. So let's begin with our title, "And the Ghosts" by Graham Faust uses a third person point of view. Now we give our definition. What is third person point of view? Well, we talked about it up here. So let's use some of that. The pronouns. The narrator is not part of the story. The narrator speaks about others, not about themselves. The narrator is the most distant from what's happening. In this case, I really want to focus on this part and this part. Let's go ahead and use this information. So we can say that down here. And the Ghosts by Graham Faust uses a third person point of view. This point of view involves pronouns. Now, instead of using like, we can level up our writing by saying such as. This point of view involves pronouns such as he, she, it, they, or them. In addition, and when we use in addition, it means we are adding on more information. In addition, the narrator speaks about others, not about themselves. Let's take it from the top and take a look at what we have. And the Ghosts by Graham Faust uses a third person point of view. This point of view involves pronouns such as he, she, it, they, or them. In addition, the narrator speaks about others, not about themselves. In the poem, and if we go back, we can see that our text evidence demonstrates that these must be read together. So the title and the line has to be read together in order to understand that third person point of view. So in this case, in the poem, the reader must, now we don't want to say read, and maybe must sounds a bit forceful. So if we say the reader reads, that sounds awkward. So let's use a different verb. In the poem, the reader experiences the title and the only line from the work, rather than saying from the poem again, from the work, as if they were one idea. Let's take a look at that one, take it from the top. And the Ghosts by Graham Faust uses a third person point of view. This point of view involves pronouns such as he, she, it, they, or them. In addition, the narrator speaks about others, not about themselves. In the poem, the reader experiences the title and the only line from the work as if they were one idea. Now we want to give the example of what we mean. For example, the title and the Ghosts states or says they own everything. In this case, they refers, and so we can say is referring, but if we want to use active voice and make it sound as if it's happening right now, we take out the is and the wases and we state it. In this case, they refers back to the ghosts. Let's take a look and take it from the top again. And the Ghosts by Graham Faust uses a third person point of view. This point of view involves pronouns such as he, she, it, they, or them. In addition, the narrator speaks about others, not about themselves. In the poem, the reader experiences the title and the only line from the work as if they were one idea. For example, the title and the ghost states they own everything. In this case, they refers back to the ghosts. Therefore, Faust uses a third person point of view to examine, perhaps, to examine the world from the ghosts or from a ghost's perspective. Because again, if the narrator speaks about others, not about themselves, and they're distant, they distance themselves, it allows them an opportunity to view the world from someone else's perspective. Now let's take a look at this. I'm going to minimize this ever so slightly, and let's take a look at our middle school paragraph as a whole. And the Ghosts by Graham Faust uses a third person point of view. This point of view involves pronouns such as he, she, it, they, or them. In addition, the narrator speaks about others, not about themselves. In the poem, the reader experiences the title and the only line from the work as if they were one idea. For example, the title and the ghosts states they own everything. In this case, they refers back to the ghosts. Therefore, Faust uses a third person point of view to examine the world from a ghost's perspective. So here we're getting to the why. If we wanted to end here with the period, you could do that. If you want to level up, you're thinking about the why. Why do that? Well, the writer, the narrator wants to view the world from a ghost's perspective. And so now let's move on to, since we were talking about the why, let's analyze our text evidence in a deeper way. So now I'm going to borrow this because we've got to go deeper as to why. And we've alluded to some of that so that we can use it. We've alluded to it. We've talked about it in our middle school paragraph, but now to level it up in our upper level or high school paragraph, we want to talk about the why. So we're going to go ahead and use this to think about the why. This is where we're doing the analysis and we're asking why. That forces us to be curious, the why. And so we have why. Well, it forces the reader, we're required, basically, the narrator and we also have to examine the world from a ghost perspective. Now we can go a little bit deeper and think about the fact that he said they own everything. So why say that they own everything? Why might a ghost own everything? Is it because they're not alive? Is it because they're free to move? So they're free to shift and form and travel. So is there a sense of freedom when you're a ghost? So I'm again just brainstorming ideas. Why use and the ghosts, they own everything. Thinking about this ownership of why is it that they own everything? So we can talk about free. Again, these are opinions we're inferring, and you may have a different opinion. You should be writing those down, creating your own ideas, right, writers, to then talk about that in your paragraph. So they have ghosts are free to roam. They're free to go anywhere. They're free to do anything. Free to own everything. We don't want to use the text evidence. So free to own everything. The world is theirs. And maybe that's really what's being said here. The world is theirs to explore. The world is theirs to experience, to explore. And even the title, and the ghosts. Notice how, and usually any instructor, any person would argue or would say, never start a sentence with and. Well, in this case, Graham Faust starts the title with and forces us as the reader to go, and the ghosts, they own everything. It almost makes it seem as if it is in mid thought, in the middle of a thought, or a half thought, or an afterthought. So think about it like that. If I was to cut, if we're talking and we say something else, and we begin with, and we say something else, it's almost like we're cut off, we're cut in the middle of a topic or a sentence. So, and the ghosts. So this idea of mid thought, mid sentence, we're cut off from what we were saying or thinking. I mean, who's to say? Maybe Graham Faust is, he's a poet. He's sitting in a room, and all of a sudden, let's say, you're in a room and there's no wind, but the curtain starts moving, or a candle that you've lit is flickering for whatever reason, but the room is still, and you're in the middle of a thought. And all of a sudden you start to think about, and I snap my fingers there, all of a sudden you start to think about ghosts for a reason, because you're the only one in a room, but then something happens that's very mysterious or interesting. So this idea of this and so I'm really talking about the and on that part, besides the and they own everything. So in this part, it's a little bit different. So I want to make sure that that we know for this part, I'm referring back to the and. I'm going to move this. Free to go anywhere, free to do anything. free to go anywhere, do anything. And then I want to make sure that we're thinking about, again, the and the and mid-thought, mid-sentence, cut out off from what we were saying or what we were thinking or what the narrator was thinking, saying, or thinking. And so that could also be connected in some way with this third person. Again, maybe we were in our own thoughts. Narrator was in his or her own thoughts. And then something mysterious might have happened. So again, these are a lot of inferences, and some of you may say, well, Cruz, this is a little bit too much. You're going way too deep, but that's part of analysis, and you are free to go as deep as you would like. That's part of the fun behind it, is that when you have such a simple poem, it's not, where it's not very complex, it forces you to, I was trying to tab this, but it's not letting me. So, it forces you to think about, well, it allows you to be curious and think about, well, what did they mean by this and? What's that about? And that's what I love about this poem, is it seems very simple, simplistic on the surface, but when we start to analyze, it gets deeper. It becomes more complex. Now let's take a look at how we might construct our high school paragraph. So you can bet I'm going to take quite a bit, right, writers, from our middle school paragraph. We've done a lot of the work from that part, but now we get to really unpack, really explore, infer what is being discussed, why use this third person point of view. That's what writing is about. Now we're going to chip away at our high school paragraph. You can bet we're going to borrow from our middle school paragraph here. So I'm going to hit that Control C and Control V. And what's fun about this high school paragraph, we have a lot more expertise and analyzing and inferences. And even though we may be going off into this deeper landscape that even Graham Faust thinks to himself and goes, what? That's not at all what I was thinking. We have the power as the writer to infer what we want based on the text evidence that's given. We have that power as the writer. So we have our high school paragraph using our middle school paragraph, but now we're going to chip away and we're going to go deeper based on the text evidence, this analysis that we have. That the why, examine why say they own everything. Well, to examine the world from a ghost perspective, because ghosts are free to roam. They can go anywhere. They can do anything. The world is theirs to experience, to explore. Why use this title and? Why begin with and? Well, it makes it seem as if the narrator is in mid-thought, mid-sentence. It's cut off from what he or she was thinking or saying. The narrator was in his or her own thoughts, and then perhaps maybe something mysterious happened. That's not to say we have to use all of this, but we have a lot to work with when we write our paragraph. So in looking at our paragraph, And the Ghosts by Graham Faust uses a third person point of view. This point of view involves pronouns such as he, she, it, they, or them. In addition, the narrator speaks about others, not about themselves. In the poem, so I'm going to take this part out and I'm going to read it and see if this sounds okay. So taking a look at what we have here. And the Ghosts by Graham Faust uses a third person point of view. This point of view involves pronouns such as he, she, it, they, or them. In the poem, the reader experiences the title and the only line from the work as if they were one idea. For example, the title And the Ghosts states they own everything. In this case, they refers back to the ghosts. Now, instead of saying therefore and ending it, we want to analyze the why. For example, the title and the ghost states they own everything. In this case, they refers back to the ghosts. Now I'm going to cut this off, and now I'm going to use all these ideas that I have here. So I'm going to hit my Control C, and then I'm going to hit my Control V to set this up. I am going to move this down. Bear with me, Right Riders, as I just set this up here. And so we can be looking at it with one lens here. So in this case, they refers back to the ghosts. Because the narrator, in this case, they refers back to the ghosts because the narrator argues, and the fact that the narrator said they own everything, they just state it. They own everything. There's no they may own everything. There's no helping verb. It just says they own everything. That's makes it sound like a very argumentative, persuasive tone. And so that's why I'm using that word argues. In this case, we don't mean a confrontation. We're just saying that the narrator is being persuasive. So in this case, they refers back to the ghosts because the narrator argues that ghosts have the ability or are free or to experience the world, argues that ghosts experience the world or have the freedom. Because the narrator argues that ghosts have the freedom. So I'm sort of combining a few of these ideas together into one sentence. Argues that the ghosts have the freedom to experience the world as if it were theirs. As if it were theirs to explore. Ghosts are free to roam. Ghosts can roam freely. And so they have that freedom. They can do whatever they want, whenever they want. Ghosts can roam freely. They can go wherever they want, whenever they want. Let's take a look, and we're going to start it from here down. In this case, they refers back to the ghosts because the narrator argues that ghosts have the freedom to experience the world as if it were theirs to explore. Ghosts can roam freely. They can go wherever they want, whenever they want. And I think we've pretty much talked about that part of the text evidence, demonstrating this third person, and even using they and their. So ghosts can roam freely. They can go wherever they want, whenever they want. They can go wherever they want, whenever they want. Therefore, Faust uses a third person point of view to examine the world from a ghost's perspective. I'm going to change just a few things. In this case, the pronoun they. Then I say freedom and freely. I'm going to change that and remove it. And maybe just say ghosts roam. And maybe if I wanted to get just extra fancy with the punctuation, I might use a colon there. Ghosts roam. And then it continues my thought. Ghosts roam. They can go wherever they want, whenever they want. Therefore, Faust uses this third person point of view to examine the world from a ghost's perspective. And so we may decide this is it. I'm satisfied with this. I can stop now for my high school paragraph. However, if we wanted, stick it out, right writers, if you're ready for the and part, so we can include that and just expand on this idea just a little bit more because it uses the word and. And that title begins with an and we're always, taught not to do that. And so thinking about that, we want to continue. Indeed, Faust teases the reader by beginning the title of his poem with the word and. And now we're going to use this information that we have down here to elaborate on that. Now I'm going to do some editing. So bear with me, right writers. By beginning the title, not only that, by beginning the title of his poem with the word and, the reader is made to feel. The reader feels, notice how I'm taking out that is made to feel. The reader, and I'm using active voice, the reader feels or senses that the narrator was cut off from what that Faust, because it is the title of the poem, he chose the title. The reader senses that Faust may have been cut off from what he was doing, what he was thinking, saying, from what he was doing. Therefore, or this further, and so again, thinking about this mid-thought, mid-sentence, cut off from what we were saying, thinking, narrator was in his or her own thoughts, then something mysterious happened. So I'm going to go ahead and continue. Therefore, Faust uses this third-person point of view to examine the world from a ghost perspective. Not only that, by beginning the title of his poem with the word and, the reader senses that, and we can put a comma here, the reader senses that Faust may have been cut off from what he was doing, further arguing that he had no choice but to jot this poem down in mid-thought, but to perhaps jot this poem. So instead of write, I put jot because, again, we've got a 6-word poem here. Jot this poem down in mid-thought or mid-sentence. In mid-thought. I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm going to add the word mysteriously, because when we think about ghosts, we think mystery, we think something eerie. So I want to leave that adverb. We've got our ly. So we really leveled up this interpretation, this analysis, by adding this particular piece. Not necessary for the paragraph, but we leveled up and we just elevated our examination of what on the surface may seem like a very simple poem, yet becomes more and more complex the further we look at it. So take a look at this whopper here, this high school paragraph. All right, we're going to take it from the top, right, writers? And if you stuck it out, you're really nerding out with me here. And the Ghosts by Graham Faust uses a third-person point of view. This point of view involves pronouns such as he, she, it, they, or them. In the poem, the reader experiences the title and the only line from the work as if they were one idea. For example, the title and the ghosts states they own everything. In this case, the pronoun they refers back to the ghosts because the narrator argues that ghosts have the freedom to experience the world as if it were theirs to explore. Ghosts roam. They can go wherever they want, whenever they want. Therefore, Faust uses this third person point of view to examine the world from a ghost's perspective. Not only that, but by beginning the title of his poem with the word and, the reader senses that Faust may have been mysteriously cut off from what he was doing, further arguing that he, the narrator, had no choice but to jot this poem down in mid-thought within a third-person point of view. For a first draft, I'm satisfied with that, right, writers? And I'm just going to minimize this a little bit more so we can see also our middle school paragraph. So we have this. I'm going to go ahead and delete all of this that we have here. And we're going to bring this one up to join our middle school paragraph. And so we can begin to see, again, we have much freedom as writers, and it's really our decision how we want to set this up, how we want to set up our writing success. It is completely up to us. Thank you so much, Right Writers, for joining me. I hope this was very helpful, useful, exciting, interesting, thinking about third person from a poem which contained 6 words. Thank you so much, Poetry Foundation and Graham Faust, for giving us this work and letting us deconstruct it, tear it apart. Have a great day, Right Writers. Take care. Love you guys. Bye-bye.